$4.4 million. That is what Colonial Pipeline paid in ransom, and most people get the CIA Triad question about it completely wrong on the Security Plus exam. One reused password shut the fuel off for the entire East Coast in May of 2021. Almost everyone files that breach under availability, and there is one word buried in the story that flips the whole answer. Stay with us, because that one word is worth real points.
CIA is what we protect. AAA is how we control who gets to touch it. This is Professor Erica, and if you confuse those two letter groups, CompTIA will punish you for it across the entire exam.
Chris here, and here's why this one matters more than any other foundation. Objective 1.2 is the base every other domain stands on. Get it wrong and the mistakes cascade all the way through crypto, operations, and governance.
Today we go deep on that objective, the most confused foundation in all of Security Plus. We define every term, draw the two frameworks side by side, watch integrity break in a live terminal, phone in an expert on audit logging, and then sort the trick questions the way the exam writers actually score them.
Hey everyone, Cynthia here, and it is completely normal to mix these up at first, so let me make the CIA Triad concrete. Confidentiality means secrets stay secret. When attackers walked off with 147 million records from Equifax, that was a confidentiality breach, plain and simple.
Integrity is the quiet one people forget. It is not about secrecy at all. It means the data is exactly what it should be, unaltered and trustworthy. Change one number in a bank ledger or one dosage in a medical chart, and you have broken integrity without leaking a single secret or taking anything offline. The data still works perfectly, it just lies.
And availability is the simplest to feel. The data can be perfectly secret and perfectly correct, but if you cannot reach it when you need it, security has still failed. Ransomware lives right here, locking authorized users out of their own files.
And ransomware is just one way availability dies. A flood of junk traffic and a denial of service attack. A failed hard drive with no backup, even a backhoe through a fiber line all attack the same leg. Anything that puts authorized users on the wrong side of a locked door is an availability problem, no hacker required.
Here is the part that trips good students up. The exam loves to put the three legs in tension. Lock a file behind so much encryption that the only key is lost and you just traded a confidentiality win for an availability disaster. Real security balances all three, never one cranked to the maximum.
There is a quiet fourth idea on the back of the triangle too. The one CompTIA calls out by name in 1.2 is non-repudiation, proof that a specific person did a specific thing so they cannot later deny it. Hold that word because it is the thread that stitches the two frameworks together at the end.
Before we go deeper, look at the shape they built this whole field on. 3 goals, 1 triangle, and every control you will ever study exists to serve one of these 3 corners. Notice the information sits protected right in the middle.
And notice how durable that shape is. Zero Trust, the cloud, post-quantum cryptography, every new framework still bows to the same triangle. New words, the same 3 corners underneath them.
Erica, a lot of folks keep hitting the exact same wall on this in the comments. Read out the question they keep asking us because it is the whole reason we are here.
Gladly, and it is the right place to start. It is the most asked question under every Foundations video. They write, "Why do I keep mixing up CIA and AAA on practice tests? They feel like the same thing?" That confusion is exactly what we are pulling apart today.
Honest answer, they get taught as one fuzzy blob, so we are going to separate them cleanly and keep them separate. Coming up, the one line that sorts every question, 3 real breaches drawn on the board, a live hash you can watch break, an expert on the phone, and the exact wording trap that decides the colonial question. Let us go.
Here is the cleanest line between these two frameworks, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it on the exam. The CIA Triad is a set of goals about the data itself, while AAA is a set of mechanisms about the identity of whoever is reaching for that data.
Say the headline once more, slowly, because it is the whole episode in 8 words and it is the highest leverage sentence in this domain.
CIA protects data. AAA controls identity and access. Write that one sentence on the inside of your skull, because it resolves the majority of these questions before you even finish reading them.
Think of a museum because that picture makes it click and it carries us through the whole episode. The CIA Triad is everything protecting the painting itself, the climate control case keeping it intact, the alarm, the backup vault. AAA is the guard at the door checking your ticket, deciding which rooms you may enter, and writing your name in the visitor log on the way in.
And notice the trap inside that picture. The guard at the door is not the painting. People see a login screen and call it confidentiality, but it is not. A login is the guard. It is authentication. It is AAA.
Let me bind 2 controls to their corners so this stops being abstract, because the exam tests the control, not just the goal. Encryption scrambles data so unauthorized eyes see gibberish. And crucially, it is reversible with the right key that serves confidentiality so it lands squarely as a CIA control.
Hashing is different because it hides nothing. It produces a fingerprint that changes completely if the data changes by even 1 byte, which serves integrity. So encryption defends confidentiality, while hashing defends integrity, the same toolbox aimed at 2 different corners of the triangle.
Now hold the museum image and look at the login box one more time. The username and password field is AAA. It controls access. It is not protecting the data itself. It is deciding whether you are allowed near it in the first place.
Erica, you had a sharp clarifier when we prepped this. Go ahead and put it to the panel, because students live and die on this exact decision under pressure.
Here it is, and it is the question every test taker actually needs answered. Under exam pressure, when the wording is deliberately fuzzy, what is the single fastest way to decide whether a scenario is CIA or AAA?
Which brings us to the only test you need. Find the verb in the question. Protect, hide, or correct points at CIA. Prove who you are or grant permission points at AAA. The verb is the whole tell.
And the beautiful part is how calm it makes you under pressure. The question writers pack the stem with scary nouns, breach, hacker, millions of records, hoping you panic and grab confidentiality. You just slide past all of it and hunt for the one verb that says what was actually done.
Let me run you through it as a drawing, because this is the comparison that finally makes it stick. 2 columns, side by side, the question each framework actually answers. On the left lives CIA, all about the data. Is it secret, is it true, and is it reachable? Those 3 questions are the entire job of the triad, and whoever you are is simply the wrong question to ask in this column.
And now the right column, AAA, all about the access. Prove who you are, what may you do, and what did you do? Notice that protect the data slides off the bottom here because guarding the data is the left column's job, never this one. So when an item says an attacker altered a financial record, that is integrity, a CIA goal. When it says an attacker logged in with a stolen password, that is authentication, a AAA failure. Same breach story, 2 different letters, decided entirely by the verb.
There is one more layer the exam folds in here, and it is worth a minute. Confidentiality is not one thing. It applies across 3 states of data. Data at rest sitting on a disk, data in transit moving across the wire, and data in use loaded in memory.
And each state wants a different control. At rest, you reach for full disk or file encryption. In transit, you reach for transport encryption like TLS. In use is the hardest, which is why secure enclaves exist. Same goal, 3 different defenses for the 3 states.
Lock that one sentence in before we go anywhere else. CIA protects data, AAA controls access, and the verb decides. Next, we make it real with 3 breaches you have heard of, and we watch integrity actually break in a terminal. Let me pause for just a second, because this genuinely helps. If you are getting value here, hit that like button, then subscribe and ring the bell. It costs you nothing, and it is the single biggest thing that keeps these videos coming.
Definitions fade fast, real breaches stick. So let me give you one famous case for each leg of the triangle, the kind you have actually heard about in the news. These are the anchors that make the abstract finally hold, and they are exactly the stories CompTIA reshapes into questions.
Confidentiality first then, and start with the cleanest example in the book, Equifax in 2017.
Right, attackers walked off with the personal records of roughly 147 million Americans, which is close to half the adult population of the country. Social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, all of it exposed to people who had no right to any of it.
And notice what the attackers did with that data. Nothing was altered, nothing was made unreachable. The records were simply seen by people who had no right to see them. That is the definition of a confidentiality breach. Secrets that stopped being secret.
Availability next, and this one surprises people. The 2017 NotPetya outbreak hit the shipping giant Maersk so hard that terminals and ports around the world went dark. Most folks call it a ransomware case and stop there.
And the scale of it is the part that lands. Maersk had to reinstall roughly 4,000 servers and 45,000 computers. Dozens of ports went dark, and the losses ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So here is the question the exam is really asking. Why is it availability and not confidentiality when ransomware is right there in the story?
Because of the twist the exam loves. NotPetya was a wiper wearing a ransomware costume, and its encryption was irreversible by design because a usable key was never even kept. Nothing could be decrypted, so the real victim was availability. The data was not locked away, it was simply gone.
Which leaves integrity, and it rarely makes headlines precisely because nothing leaks and nothing goes down. So let me stop describing integrity and actually show you what it means, because the exam tests the mechanism, not just the word. In our lab, I have a payroll file, and I am going to fingerprint it with a hash.
And to be clear for everyone, this whole demo runs on a local virtual machine we own. Go ahead, Erica.
Watch this. I run SHA-256 on the file, and the command hands back a long string of hex. That string is the fingerprint of every single byte in that file, right now.
Now do the attack. Change one thing, a single character. Bump that salary from 58,000 to 85,000, save it, and rerun the exact same hash command. Watch the fingerprint.
That is the avalanche effect, and it is the entire reason hashing guards integrity. One changed byte produces a completely different, unpredictable fingerprint. So if the file arrives with a hash that does not match the one you started with, you know instantly that something touched it, even if the change is invisible to the eye.
And that is why a silent integrity attack is so dangerous without it. Picture an attacker who quietly changes one shipping address in a logistics database. No data stolen, no outage, the system hums along. The damage is that the record now lies, and everyone downstream trusts it anyway. A matching hash is what would have caught it.
Now the one that breaks people, and it is the reason this whole episode exists. Colonial Pipeline, 2021. The fuel crisis, the ransom, the panic buying. Every instinct screams confidentiality or availability.
And I will say the quiet part out loud because a new student is thinking it. The headlines were all about gas and money, so confidentiality feels like the obvious answer. Why is that instinct wrong?
Because the instinct reads the vibe, not the verb. The attacker logged in. The very first move was an account login using a leaked reused password on a VPN that had no second factor. Logging in is authentication, so the root failure is AAA, not CIA at all.
Hold on, that is too clean. The pipeline went down, so availability got hit.
Fair, and that is actually the better answer. The ransomware that followed did attack availability, a CIA leg, so you are not wrong that availability suffered. The complete read is an authentication failure that then caused an availability impact. The root cause is AAA, the downstream effect is CIA, and on the exam that distinction between root and consequence is the difference between a pass and a fail.
And that is the move the whole exam rewards. A single incident can damage 2 or 3 legs at once, but the question wants the primary one, the root of the failure. Name the leg the scenario actually targeted first, not every leg it eventually touched.
So here is your rep for this scene: 4 breaches and 4 labels. Equifax is confidentiality, NotPetya is availability, the tampered payroll file is integrity, and Colonial is authentication first, availability second. Say those out loud once and they are yours.
And Colonial is the bridge into the rest of the video. To understand why a login was the real failure, we have to give AAA the same careful treatment we gave the triangle. That is the next scene, and it is where the panel takes over. We nailed the CIA side, so now AAA deserves the same treatment because it has 3 distinct steps people blur into one. Erica, you take authentication, and Chris, you have got authorization. I will keep us honest in the middle and pull in the third A at the end.
Authentication is step 1, proving you are who you claim to be. 1.2 splits it 2 ways the exam loves to test: authenticating people and authenticating systems, and most students only ever picture the human half.
So slow down on the human half for a second, because the factors trip everyone. Walk us through them plainly.
Gladly, authenticating people uses factors, and there are 3 core categories. Something you know is a password, something you have is a token or a security key, and something you are is a fingerprint. Combine 2 different categories, and you have multi-factor authentication.
And that combined 2 different categories part is where the points hide, so say why it matters.
Because a stolen password is only one category, something you know. Add a phone code, something you have, and the attacker needs to beat 2 completely different kinds of proof. The exam also lists 2 attributes alongside the 3 factors: somewhere you are, your location, and something you do, your typing rhythm, which sharpen risk-based logins.
Do not skip the systems half though, because that is the sleeper on the exam. A server proving its identity with a certificate, or 2 services trusting each other with API keys, has no human anywhere in the exchange, and it is still authentication.
And that is exactly where Colonial Pipeline failed, not confidentiality authentication. 1 account, 1 factor, a password that had already leaked, so the attacker proved a false identity because nothing forced a second factor.
Let me stop you right there, because this is the trap the whole exam is built on. People hear that story and conclude the data was the weak point. Erica, was it?
The data was never the failure, the door check was. That is the entire reason CompTIA separates AAA from CIA. The breach was an access control problem wearing a confidentiality costume.
And one quick exam nail before we move on, because this one shows up constantly. A factor is not the same as a step, so 2 passwords are still just 1 factor, something you know, which is single factor done twice, no matter how many boxes you fill in. Real multi-factor crosses categories, like a password plus a phone code.
Which hands me the baton, because authorization is step 2. Once you are authenticated, authorization decides what you are allowed to do. Proving who you are does not grant you everything. A logged-in user is not an admin, and closing that gap is the whole point of least privilege.
Give us the models by name, Chris, because CompTIA expects you to recognize each one on site.
On it, role-based access ties permissions to your job, so a nurse role opens patient charts and nothing else. Mandatory access uses classification labels the user cannot override, the model the military runs on, where top secret means top secret no matter who you are. Discretionary lets the data owner decide who gets in, and attribute-based weighs conditions like time of day, device, and location before it grants anything.
There is a rule-based flavor too, and people confuse it with role-based constantly. Rule-based applies a blanket rule to everyone, like the firewall denies all traffic on this port, while role-based keys off who you are. Same first 3 letters, completely different mechanism, and CompTIA absolutely tests the difference.
Give me the one-line trap, Chris, because people swap authentication and authorization on every other question.
Authentication is who you are, authorization is what you may do. A question that says a user logged in fine but could not open a folder is an authorization story, not an authentication one. The sign-in already succeeded, so the failure has to live 1 step later.
So can we just call authorization the important half and move on?
Not a chance, because the third A catches the person who passed both of the first 2. That is accounting, and it is the one everybody forgets.
And accounting is exactly where this whole video ties back together, so we are giving it a scene of its own. We even phoned in someone who lives in audit logs to do it right.
So the three A's are a sequence, and saying them in order fixes them. Authentication proves who, authorization grants what, and accounting records the whole thing, identity, permission, and the paper trail, in that exact order.
So here's where the panel lands it. CIA is the goal, and AAA is how you enforce that goal on real people and real systems. Authentication proves who, authorization grants what, and accounting records it. Hold that sequence, because the third A is about to become the star of the show.
So the third A is the one everybody forgets, and it is the one that ties this whole video back to scene 1, accounting. And we did not want to hand wave it, so the team called in someone who reads audit logs for a living. Kai, you have the exact question the comments keep leaving on this one, so put it to our guest and get them on the line.
Gladly, and it is the perfect thing to ask them. People write in and ask if a user is fully authenticated and fully authorized, what actually stops them from abusing that access? Let me get Professor Renner on the line.
Happy to be here. And that question cuts right to why the third A exists at all. Authentication and authorization both happen at the door, deciding whether you get in and which rooms you may enter. But once you are inside and legitimately allowed to be there, neither one is watching you anymore.
So who is watching then, once someone is already through the door?
Accounting, sometimes called auditing, is the record of what an authenticated, authorized subject actually did. Every login, every file opened, every command run written to a log. It is the receipt for the session, and it is the only A that keeps working after the door is already open.
Make that concrete for us with one person, because the abstract version never sticks.
Gladly. Picture Diane, a hospital records clerk who is fully authorized to view patient charts. She is authenticated, she is authorized, everything is by the book. And then she opens the chart of a celebrity she has no business looking at. No password failed, no permission was bypassed.
So which A catches Diane then? Because on paper she did nothing wrong.
Only accounting catches her. Not authentication, she logged in fine. Not authorization, she had the role. It is the audit log that records she opened that specific chart at that specific time, and that record is what holds her accountable. Strip the logging away and Diane is invisible.
Now tie it back to that fourth word from scene 1, because this is the handshake I promised. Where does non-repudiation actually come from?
Non-repudiation is accounting with proof strong enough that the person cannot deny it later. And the mechanism the exam pairs with it is the digital signature. You sign a hash of the action with your private key. Anyone can verify it with your public key. And verification fails if even one bit changed.
Which is why it proves two things at once, and this is the part I want everyone to catch. The verification succeeding proves integrity, the record was not altered. And because only the holder of that private key could have signed it, it proves non-repudiation. The signer cannot claim it was not them. Integrity plus identity in one move.
Exactly. And here is where teams get burned. So let me show you what a real audit trail looks like and the trap hiding inside it. In our lab, I pull the authentication log, and every one of these lines is accounting in action. Read those 3 lines top to bottom, and you have the whole framework. Authentication passed with a second factor, authorization granted the clerk role, and accounting recorded the one read that gets Diane fired. 3 A's, 1 session, right there in the log.
But wait, can Diane just delete that line about herself?
That is exactly the trap, and it is why auditors obsess over log integrity. If an attacker or an insider can quietly edit the logs after the fact, your accounting is worthless because you can no longer trust what it says. So the strongest setups ship those logs to a separate write-only system where no one can rewrite history.
And catch what that quietly implies about the two frameworks we spent this whole video separating.
Right, accounting only works when its own integrity holds. So the audit trail leans on a hash, a CIA integrity control, to make itself trustworthy. That is the two frameworks holding each other up, which is the real answer to your viewer's question.
That is the handshake right there. The fourth idea on the triangle, non-repudiation, lives inside the third A, accounting, and it borrows integrity to stay honest. Professor Renner, thank you. That landed the whole point.
So the two frameworks were never really separate. CIA sets the goals, AAA enforces them on real people, and the signed audit trail is the exact seam where they meet. Now let us make sure the exam can never trick you on any of it.
Last scene, and it is the payoff you came for. This is the exact sorting machine that turns these trick questions from a nervous coin flip into a sure thing you can run in seconds.
The whole skill is one move, and it is almost embarrassingly simple once it clicks. Find the verb in the question and ignore how dramatic the story sounds. The breach narrative is bait. The verb is the answer.
Sort by the verb, not the vibe. A scary breach story tempts you toward confidentiality every single time, but the verb tells you what was actually attacked, and the verb is the only thing CompTIA grades.
Run the Colonial case through it one more time because it is the model for the rest. The story screams confidentiality, fuel crisis, ransom, headlines. But the operative verb was, an attacker logged in, and logged in is authentication, so the root failure is AAA.
Now the classics, they recycle endlessly, and these are almost word for word what you will see. First one. The data was encrypted, perfectly confidential, but the server was down, so nobody could reach it. The verb is reach, that is availability, still CIA, just a different leg from the one the encryption part wants you to pick.
Next one. An attacker quietly altered a logistics record so a shipment went to the wrong address and nothing leaked and nothing went offline. The verb is altered, that is integrity, a pure CIA answer, no AAA anywhere in sight.
And the gentle cousin of that one. An insider copied a folder of customer files and emailed it to a personal account with nothing changed and nothing taken offline. The verb is copied or leaked, so that is confidentiality, another CIA leg decided the same calm way.
Next, a user signs in successfully but cannot open the payroll folder. The verb is cannot open after a successful sign-in, so authentication already passed. The block came one step later, at the permission check. So this is authorization, which is AAA.
And the meanest one of all. The story spends 3 sentences on a data breach, then asks which control would have prevented the initial access. Do not answer confidentiality. The initial access was a login, so the prevention is multi-factor authentication. AAA.
Now layer in the wording trap CompTIA is famous for, the words best, first, and most likely. When a question asks for the best objective violated, 2 answers may both be technically true, and you must pick the one that is primary, the root, not a downstream side effect.
Back to Colonial, where both authentication and availability were genuinely hit. If the stem asks for the best description of the initial compromise, the root verb is logged in, so authentication wins and availability is only the consequence. The words most and best always reward the root cause.
And one honest caution, so you do not over-apply the trick. The verb test is a tool, not a religion. Read the entire stem before you commit, because a question can deliberately bury the operative verb in the 3rd sentence, or hand you 2 verbs and dare you to pick the wrong one. The skill is finding the right verb, the one that names the root action.
Let me lay it all out in one grid so it lives in your memory as a shape, not a list. Row 1 is logged in with a stolen password. That verb is authentication, so it lands under AAA. Row 2 is altered a record, which is integrity, so it goes under CIA. Row 3 is could not reach the data, which is availability, CIA again. Row 4 is login worked but access denied, which is authorization, back to AAA. And row 5 is leaked a record, plain confidentiality. 5 verbs, 5 clean placements, and no guessing.
And let us kill the biggest myth of all, the one that keeps people stuck, because it is the reason this objective feels impossible at first. The myth is that you sort these questions by how the breach feels, how big and scary the story is. Busted. You sort them by the single verb that names what was actually done, and the dramatic story is just there to fool the people who answer by feel.
So here is the verdict, the one thing to carry out of this video. CIA is what you protect, and AAA is how you control who touches it. When a question mixes them, and it will mix them on purpose, the verb decides. You are not going to answer by feel anymore.
I have seen plenty of candidates who knew every definition cold and still missed these, purely because they answered the vibe instead of the verb. Definitions are the floor, not the skill. Master this one sorting move, run it on every practice question until it is a reflex and the most confused objective on the whole exam turns into your free points.
So walk away with this single rule that covers all of it. CIA is what you protect, AAA is how you control who touches it, and the verb in the question decides which. Hold those three pieces, and objective 1.2 stops being the wall everyone hits and becomes the wall everyone else hits while you walk right through it. The whole episode in one breath. CIA is what we protect, AAA is how we control who touches it, and the verb decides which. A breach can hit several legs, but you name the root one.
The piece I would not let fade is non-repudiation. Integrity plus identity, a signature on a tamper-evident log. And remember Diane, the only A that caught her was accounting.
Here is your first rep. Take the last breach you can remember, and out loud name the verb and the root leg. That one rep is what makes it stick.
Next episode, we go straight into Zero Trust, the control plane and the data plane, where Colonial's flat network is the exact anti-pattern it was built to kill.
If this finally made CIA and AAA click, hit like and subscribe so this free series can keep building toward your pass. The free practice questions for this objective are waiting on the cert site.
Here is the one to leave in the comments. Think of the last breach you saw in the news and tell us, was the root failure really CIA or an authentication problem wearing a confidentiality costume?
Focus is a renewable resource. Spend it on what moves the needle.
8.6. Kai. The whiteboard work in Scene 3 alone earned a quarter point. This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.